The storm rolled over Riverdale like a living thing, angry, relentless, and full of warning. Thunder cracked as Sophie Miller, just 8 years old, stood at the window in her yellow raincoat, watching the sky split with light. Her small hands clutched the walkie-talkie her grandmother insisted she take whenever she ventured out. Below her, Max, the German shepherd with wheat-colored fur and a curious white star on his chest, paced in tight, anxious circles by the door. Something was wrong. "Grandma," Sophie said softly, "Max is worried." Martha didn't question it. Her body had grown frail, bound to a wheelchair now, but her mind remained sharp. Once a master dog trainer, she recognized the silent urgency in Max's gait. "Take the walkie," she told her granddaughter. "First sign of trouble, you call me." The air was thick with the smell of wet earth as Sophie followed Max through the woods, the wind pushing at her back. They climbed toward Crescent Ridge, an overgrown bluff rarely visited except by deer and the reckless. The path was slippery, the rain swallowing their footsteps, but Sophie trusted Max. When he froze and barked sharply, she knew they'd found what he sensed. There, on a crumbling ledge, clung a massive German shepherd, his body trembling with effort. The mud beneath his paws slid with each desperate movement. His eyes were wide with panic, teeth bared in fear. Sophie's heart pounded. The ridge groaned under the weight of rain and ruin. She dropped to her belly, inching closer through the sludge. "It's okay, boy," she whispered, her voice trembling but calm. "I won't hurt you." The wind ripped past them. A chunk of earth tumbled into the ravine. Sophie extended her raincoat, the dog's only lifeline. For a long, suspended moment, the animal stared at her, wild, uncertain. Then, slowly, his jaws closed on the fabric. "Hold on," she breathed. Muscles trembling, Sophie pulled. Max backed up as commanded, giving her space to drag the stranger toward safety. Just as the shepherd's paws reached solid ground, the ledge gave way with a roar. Mud and stone vanished into the void behind them. The rescued dog collapsed at her feet, soaked and shaking, but alive. Sophie knelt beside the dog, mud streaking her face and rain soaking through her sleeves as she checked him for injuries. His body was tense, but he let her touch him, just barely. That was enough. Max hovered nearby, watchful and silent, his eyes never leaving the stranger. Tires crunched on gravel. Dr. Thompson's truck skidded to a stop just beyond the ridge, followed closely by a gleaming SUV. The doctor sprinted toward Sophie, her medical bag swinging in one hand. "Sophie Miller," she exclaimed, breathless and wide-eyed, "you are either the bravest or most foolish child I've ever met." Before Sophie could respond, the man from the SUV stepped out. His polished boots sank deep into the mud. His coat, expensive and spotless, did not belong in this place. "That's my dog," Robert Wilson said coldly. "Kaiser escaped during the storm." The dog flinched at the sound of his name. Sophie rose instinctively, placing herself between the trembling animal and the man. "He almost died," she said. "He was trapped. Did you even look for him?" Wilson's face tightened. "Animals escape. It happens. Now step aside." Dr. Thompson moved between them. "This dog needs medical attention," she said firmly. "You can collect him at the clinic once he's stabilized." As they lifted the injured shepherd into the truck, Sophie noticed Wilson barely spared him a glance. Max pressed against her leg, his warmth grounding her. "You did good, Sophie," Dr. Thompson whispered as she helped the girl into the passenger seat. "Real good." 3 days later, Sophie sat cross-legged in front of Duke's kennel. That's what she called him now. Duke. His real name didn't seem to fit anymore. The wound on his leg was healing, slowly. Every afternoon after school, Sophie came to read to him, while Max lay nearby like a quiet sentinel. Sometimes Duke whimpered when the clinic door opened. Sometimes he'd flinch when men entered the room, but when Sophie spoke, he listened. "He's responding better to you than to anyone else," Dr. Thompson observed, checking Duke's bandage. "Grandma says animals know who really cares," Sophie replied. And Duke, scarred, frightened but alive, was beginning to believe it. The bell above the clinic door jingled, slicing through the quiet. Sophie turned, instantly pulling closer to Duke's kennel. His ears flattened, body tense. Robert Wilson strode in, bringing with him the sterile sting of cologne and disdain. "I've come for my dog," he announced, eyes already scanning for Duke. "There's a buyer interested in his bloodline, assuming he's still intact." "He has a name," Sophie said softly. "It's Duke." Wilson smirked. "His registered name is Champion Wilson Dales Kaiser IV. He's worth more than most homes in this town, little girl." Dr. Thompson's jaw tightened. "Mr. Wilson, I think we need to talk privately. Sophie, could you take Max outside for a minute?" Reluctantly, Sophie obeyed. She could feel Duke's eyes following her, afraid to be left alone. Outside, rain dripped from the clinic awning, ticking against the tin gutter like a nervous heartbeat. Inside, voices rose. When Sophie returned minutes later, she wasn't alone. Her grandmother had arrived. Martha's wheelchair creaked softly as she entered the clinic, her gaze locking with Wilson's like two wolves sizing each other up. "Robert," she said coolly, "it's been a long time." Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't realize you were still involved in these matters. When my granddaughter rescues a terrified dog from your negligence, I get involved." Duke's tail thumped once against the kennel floor, the first wag Sophie had seen from him. "You recognize quality when you see it, don't you?" Martha murmured to Duke, then turned back to Wilson. "Just as you recognized Max's flaw when you dumped him at the shelter." Sophie's breath caught. "Max?" Martha nodded. "He was one of Robert's breeding dogs. That little white star made him imperfect. Your mother adopted him before the accident. She never told Robert where Max ended up." Wilson's mouth opened, but no words came. Martha's voice cut through the silence. "Check his left ear. Your kennel's tattoo is still there." He did. The truth hit him like a blow. "You abandoned both of them," Sophie whispered, kneeling beside Max. The bond between them felt even stronger now, rooted in pain, in second chances. Duke whimpered softly, pushing his nose through the bars. He understood, too. Dr. Thompson cleared her throat. "Mr. Wilson, we need to discuss what's best for Duke. Legally, he may be yours, but this dog flinched at your name and growled at your presence." "I'm not here to be lectured," Wilson snapped. "I'll be back with paperwork." He stormed out, the bell above the door clanging in his wake. Silence settled like dust. Sophie knelt beside Duke's kennel again. He met her gaze this time. No growl, just tired eyes. "I want him," she whispered. "I'll train him, like I did with Max. Please." Martha's weathered hand settled on her shoulder. "Then it's time I teach you everything I know." The next weeks passed in quiet revolution. Every afternoon after school, Sophie arrived at the clinic with Max at her side and Martha's voice in her head. She practiced eye contact, gentle touch, voice tone. Duke slowly began to respond. Michael, the quiet drifter with sad eyes and skilled hands, had taken up residence in the apartment above the clinic. He built new kennels, fixed broken things no one had bothered to mend before. He always made time to watch Sophie work with Duke. "He's learning trust," Michael said one afternoon as Duke followed Sophie's command to sit and stay. "That's not easy to teach." "Grandma says I have the gift," Sophie replied. "She's been teaching me faster now, Like she's afraid she'll forget things. Michael nodded. She's right to pass it on. The town still talks about how she could calm any dog, even the worst cases. As summer deepened and leaves began to turn, Duke's transformation became undeniable. The once broken dog now wagged his tail at volunteers. He obeyed simple commands. He even allowed strangers to scratch behind his ears, just briefly, but willingly. Still, shadows lingered. Wilson's lawyer had begun making threats, legal documents, ownership claims, a potential sale to a police dog breeder in another state. He'd be miserable, Sophie said flatly one day. He hates loud noises. He's scared of being alone. Michael looked thoughtful. Has Wilson ever actually proven ownership, registration papers, vet records? Dr. Thompson frowned. Number. He keeps saying his assistant will bring them, but then maybe he doesn't have them. And for the first time, hope cracked open like a sunrise. The leaves in Riverdale began to shift. First gold, then amber, then the deep crimson of change. Sophie could feel it in everything. In the way Duke now greeted her with a low wag instead of a flinch. In the way Martha watched from her wheelchair, her eyes dimmer, but still full of pride. One September afternoon, Sophie knelt beside Duke with a treat in hand. "Sit," she whispered. He obeyed, eyes locked on hers. "Stay." She backed away, placed the treat midway between them. Duke didn't move. His tail swept the floor in anticipation, but he waited. Release. With gentle precision, he padded forward and took the treat. Sophie's laughter lit the clinic. "He's getting it," Michael said from across the room, where he was fixing a broken latch. "You're really good with him." "Grandma says he's the smartest dog she's seen, besides Max." Sophie beamed. Max lay nearby, watching with calm approval. The mentor. Outside, the wind was cooler now. Inside, Martha's strength was fading. She slept more. The tremors in her hands made it difficult to hold anything. But her voice, when she spoke, was still firm. "You're doing it right," she told Sophie. "Gentle but firm. That's the way." Michael helped wherever he could. He never hovered, but he was always there, cleaning up, repairing the old kennels, offering quiet words. Sophie felt safe with him. It wasn't just the way he treated the animals. It was the way he listened, like everything she said mattered. "Your grandmother must be proud," he told her once. Sophie glanced at Martha, who had dozed off with one of her old dog training journals in her lap. "She is, I think." "She is," Michael confirmed. That afternoon, Dr. Thompson walked in with her clipboard, eyes already scanning Duke. "He's ready," she said. "He hasn't growled in a week. He obeys every basic command." Sophie felt her heart lift, only to have it twist. But Wilson called again. The vet added quietly. "He says he has a buyer, a police breeder." "No," Sophie said. "He gets scared of sirens, of men in boots. He shakes." Michael stepped forward. "Then maybe it's time we stop waiting for him to prove ownership. Maybe we prove he doesn't have any." And just like that, the girl, the vet, and the drifter began to prepare for a fight they didn't want, but knew they must win. The opportunity to prove Duke's worth came from the most unexpected place. A therapy dog program at the local nursing home. The usual handler had canceled last minute. Dr. Thompson was about to decline when Sophie stepped forward. "Duke and Max could do it," she said, her voice steady. "We've been practicing." "Sophie." The vet hesitated, uncertain. "He's not certified, and I'll be with him. Max will show him what to do. Grandma says the best learning happens when it's real." Michael added, "I'll go too. We'll be careful." The next morning, under pale autumn sunlight, the three of them arrived at Sunshine Meadows Nursing Home. Inside, the air was warm, thick with lavender and old paper. The residents sat in a semicircle, some in wheelchairs, others hunched in chairs, faces lighting up as the dogs entered. Max went first, confident, calm, an old soul. He laid his head gently on laps, accepted strokes with quiet grace. Duke followed, hesitant, nervous, but Sophie's hand stayed on his shoulder, grounding him. He looked to Max, then to Sophie, and then he began. He moved carefully, paused before each person, accepted soft pats and gentle touches. At one point, he rested a paw, tentative featherlight, on the hand of Mr. Collins, a man who rarely spoke. The old man smiled. Michael whispered, "He's a natural." Sophie didn't reply. She was watching Duke with her whole heart. But peace never lasted long when Robert Wilson was involved. The doors burst open, his voice slicing through the quiet. "What is the meaning of this?" Duke shrank. Max stepped forward, protective. Wilson stormed in with his lawyer at his heels, eyes locking on Sophie. "You have no right parading my property like some therapy dog. This is theft." "Please lower your voice," Mrs. Jenkins, the facility director, said sharply. "You're upsetting our residents." "This dog is worth tens of thousands. He was terrified on that cliff." Sophie cut in, trembling. "You didn't even look for him." Wilson ignored her. His lawyer pulled out paperwork, threats, demands. But before it could escalate, a voice rose from the corner. "Robert Wilson," the elderly woman said, her eyes sharp as glass. "You haven't changed a bit." Everyone turned. Eleanor Foster, once the most respected dog show judge in the state, sat in her wheelchair, watching with knowing eyes. "I've seen abuse hidden beneath shiny coats. That dog trembles around you. That child calms him. I judged champions, but I also judged hearts." The room went still. Eleanor Foster's voice, though softened by age, held the kind of weight that silenced even the proud. Wilson faltered. "I remember disqualifying your first dog for aggression," she continued, her eyes not leaving him. "You blamed the handler. I see you haven't changed." Duke trembled less now. He stood beside Sophie, head low but steady. Around them, the nursing home residents watched, their quiet sympathy shifting into silent solidarity. "Your ego," Eleanor said, "has always been louder than your love." Wilson's lawyer interjected, citing property laws, registered ownership, potential litigation. But Eleanor's words had struck something deeper than legal standing. Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward. "You're disrupting our program. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Wilson scanned the room, saw the eyes, old and wise, watching him without fear. He turned to his lawyer. "File whatever's needed. I want that dog back by the end of the week." As his footsteps echoed down the hallway, the tension broke. Mr. Collins, who hadn't spoken in years, cleared his throat and said, "That man shouldn't have dogs." Laughter followed, light and surprising. It filled the room like sunlight through storm clouds. Eleanor motioned Sophie closer. "You're Martha Miller's granddaughter, aren't you?" Sophie nodded. "I thought so." "You have her hands, gentle, but firm. She was the best I ever saw. Tell her, it's time to open the cedar chest." Sophie tilted her head, unsure. "She'll understand," Eleanor said with a wistful smile. That night, as the last of the storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Sophie sat at the kitchen table while Martha pulled a small brass key from the chain around her neck. She rolled her wheelchair to the old cedar chest in the corner, untouched for years, and opened it. Inside were old photographs, faded ribbons, and documents sealed in dust. Willow Creek Shepherds, Martha's once renowned kennel, registration papers, breeding contracts, lineage charts, pride and loss and purpose, preserved in ink. One contract stood out, a breeding agreement signed by both Martha and Wilson. It included a clause, Any puppy deemed unfit for show was to be returned to Martha. Not sold, not abandoned. Max and Duke, Martha said quietly. They're half-brothers, same litter. Wilson broke the contract. Sophie touched the edge of the page, the paper trembling beneath her fingers. We're going to fight, she said. Martha looked up. Yes, love. And this time, we have proof. The storm warnings came 3 days later, swift and unforgiving. Rain lashed the rooftops, roads flooded faster than the town could react, and Riverdale braced itself for disaster. But amid the chaos, Sophie's concern wasn't for herself. It was for Duke. Dr. Thompson's clinic sat in a low-lying part of town, vulnerable to flash floods. As evacuation efforts began, Sophie insisted on helping. He gets scared during storms, she said, pulling on her raincoat. He needs me. Martha hesitated, her face pale with worry. Then bring him here. It's safer up the hill. Take the walkie-talkie. Check in every 15 minutes. Sophie promised, and with Max by her side, she set out through wind and water. By the time she reached the clinic, the nearby creek had become a churning river. Inside, chaos reigned, cages being loaded, volunteers shouting instructions, and Duke, still in his kennel, barking frantically. He wouldn't let anyone near him until Sophie arrived. The moment he heard her voice, Duke stopped barking. His body sagged in relief. We're getting you out, she whispered. They loaded Duke and Max into the back of Dr. Thompson's SUV. The plan was simple. Drive to Sophie's house, then return to help evacuate the rest. But the main bridge had already washed out. They were forced to detour through town. As they passed the nursing home, Sophie saw Mrs. Jenkins directing residents upstairs. She asked to stop, just for 5 minutes, to check on Eleanor. Dr. Thompson agreed. Inside, the scene was controlled urgency. Sophie helped move water bottles, hold doors, retrieve forgotten medication. But 5 minutes stretched longer. When she returned outside, the SUV was gone. The parking lot flooded. Panic clawed at her throat. She pulled out the walkie-talkie, static, then faintly. Sophie, water rising. Sheriff ordered. Had to move. Trying to get back. She was alone. Mrs. Jenkins urged her to stay, but Sophie shook her head. My dogs are out there, and Grandma's waiting. She zipped her coat and set off through the woods behind the home, the long way home. Mud clung to her boots, branches whipped at her arms, the storm raged, then, barking, faint at first, then closer. Max, Duke, they appeared through the rain, soaked and wild-eyed, but alive. Max rushed to her, tail wagging frantically. Duke hung close, protective. Sophie dropped to her knees, hugging them both. You found me. But they weren't alone for long. Max tugged at her sleeve. Urgent, persistent. What is it? She asked. Max barked once, then turned and ran. Stopped, looked back. He wanted her to follow. Sophie followed Max deeper into the woods, slipping over roots and ducking beneath low branches. Rain poured in sheets, drowning the world in gray. Duke stayed close at her side, flinching with each thunderclap. They climbed until the trees thinned, revealing a forgotten clearing. In its center stood a half-collapsed cabin, skeletal and broken by time. Hello? Sophie called out. A weak voice answered from inside. Help, please. She pushed open the shattered door. Inside, an elderly man lay pinned beneath a beam. His leg was twisted unnaturally, his face pale with pain. Mr. Crawford, Sophie gasped, an old hunter known in town for living alone. What happened? Roof gave out. Can't move. She tried to lift the beam, but it wouldn't budge. Her walkie-talkie was broken from the fall. Panic swelled, but then she looked at Max. Go home, she whispered, pointing back through the woods. Find Grandma. Get help. Max tilted his head, uncertain. He whined, hesitating. "Go," Sophie urged, tears in her eyes. "Please." Max lingered one heartbeat longer, then turned and ran into the storm. Sophie turned back to Mr. Crawford, laying her raincoat over him. "You'll be okay. Max is fast. He'll bring help." Duke curled beside them, pressing his body against hers like a living blanket. Together, they waited. The wind howled around the cabin. Water seeped beneath the door. To keep Mr. Crawford awake, Sophie asked about his childhood hunts. He spoke slowly, voice fading, but she kept him talking. Duke never moved. Then, a noise, barking, voices, flashlights. "We're in here," Sophie cried. Michael was the first through the door, his face tight with worry. Behind him came the sheriff and rescue workers. They worked quickly, stabilizing the beam, lifting Mr. Crawford free. "You've taken 10 years off my life," Michael said, kneeling to hug her. Sophie held him tightly, but her eyes were on Max, muddy, soaked, panting, but triumphant. "He found you," she said, her voice cracking. "He really did it." "Your grandmother called the whole town," Michael said. "Max led us right here." But time was short. "The dam upstream's showing signs of failure," the sheriff warned. "If it breaks, this whole area floods." Michael scooped Sophie onto his back. Duke led the way as they began their climb toward safety. Behind them, the world churned with rising water. They had just reached the forest's edge when the roar came. It was not thunder. It was the sound of the world breaking. "The dam's gone," a voice crackled over the sheriff's radio. "Get to high ground." The team froze. Water surged through the valley below, ripping trees from their roots, swallowing everything in its path. "There." Sophie pointed to a massive oak with thick, low-hanging branches. It was their only chance. Michael hoisted her into the tree first, then helped the rescue workers lift Mr. Crawford's stretcher high into the limbs. Duke whimpered, resisting, until Michael scooped him up and wedged him onto a sturdy branch beside Sophie. The large shepherd trembled, his body pressed against the bark. Then, the flood hit. A wall of water crashed through the clearing, smashing debris, swallowing trails. The ground vanished beneath a churning brown sea. Sophie clung to the tree with white-knuckled hands, her heart pounding in her ears. Max had climbed up too, paws scrabbling against the bark. He found a place beside her, his body braced against hers. Together, the two dogs formed a living shield around the girl. "Hold on," Michael shouted, his voice barely carried above the roar. Sophie looked out and saw the impossible. Their town, transformed into an ocean. Houses reduced to islands, trees half submerged, all her familiar places gone beneath the surge. She squeezed her eyes shut. Time blurred in the darkness. Cold soaked into her bones, but she didn't let go. Eventually, light. Dawn broke gray and fragile over Riverdale. The floodwaters had stilled, but the damage was everywhere. Helicopter blades cut the silence. A rope descended. National Guard rescuers lowered themselves into the tree and began extracting them, one by one. Sophie was the last to be lifted out. Max and Duke followed, both cradled like heroes. At the emergency shelter, Sophie barely left her grandmother's side. Martha had collapsed the night before, overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion. She now lay in a hospital bed, her face pale, her breathing shallow. Dr. Thompson sat beside Sophie. "She's stable, but very sick. The storm took a toll." Sophie nodded slowly. Her hand rested on Martha's, small fingers curled around paper-thin skin. Outside the door, Max and Duke lay like sentries, silent, unwavering, waiting. The shelter buzzed with movement, volunteers handing out blankets, nurses tending to the injured. But Sophie barely noticed. Her world was reduced to the pale face on the pillow beside her. "She tried to go out and find you," Dr. Thompson said gently. "When Max showed up alone, she panicked, got stuck in the mud, fell from her chair." Sophie's throat tightened. "Is she going to wake up?" The vet hesitated. "She's a fighter." But this hit her hard. In the hallway, Max and Duke stayed pressed to the wall near the room. They refused to leave, even when food was offered. Max's ears perked at every sound. Duke paced once, then lay back down, eyes fixed on the door. Later, Sophie was called to the waiting room. Sheriff Davis stood with a small crowd. Beside him, Mr. Crawford's family, eyes full of gratitude, and a man in a rumpled suit Sophie recognized as Robert Wilson's lawyer. "There she is," the sheriff said with a proud smile. "The hero of Crescent Ridge." "I'm not a hero," Sophie muttered. "I just followed Max." "You stayed with Mr. Crawford," the sheriff reminded her. "You saved his life." Mrs. Crawford stepped forward. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Another hour out there and—" Sophie looked down. Duke helped too. He kept us warm. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Miller, I have something for you." He held out an envelope. "Mr. Wilson has decided to relinquish all claims to the dog known as Duke. These are the legal transfer papers. He is yours." Sophie blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. "He's giving him up?" The man nodded stiffly. "His kennels were destroyed in the flood. Several dogs were lost. He's reassessing things." Sophie clutched the envelope to her chest. Behind her, Duke let out a soft whine, as if sensing the moment. That night, she sat by Martha's side once more. The rain had stopped. Max curled at her feet. Duke lay on the floor near the window, his breathing deep and even. Sophie whispered into Martha's hand, "He's ours now, Grandma. He's safe." And just before dawn, Martha stirred. Her fingers moved. Sophie looked up, heart skipping, and saw her grandmother smile.